Understanding Welfare Policy on Incarceration, an Intersectional Approach. Today I'm presenting my research on how state welfare policy impacts incarceration rates. I take an intersectional approach by looking at incarceration rates by race and gender. I take this approach to understand the prominence of welfare policy on mass incarceration and how it may impact the racial and gender disparities of the prison system. I specifically focus on state TANF policy to explore the impact of welfare policy since the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act of 1996. It greatly decentralized welfare by giving the power to the states to implement and enforce TANF programs. TANF was created with the goal to reorient welfare from being an entitlement program to encouraging workforce participation by creating work requirements and limiting assistance to 5 years. It gives states the ability to decide how strict or generous their state policy will be. With that being said, I explore how this new era of welfare policy, in which the states have control, impacts state incarceration rates. Do states with more punitive, less generous welfare policy have higher rates of incarceration? I argue that yes, states with more punitive, less generous welfare policy have higher rates of incarceration. I theorize that this is because weak welfare policy increases the state's dependence on penal institutions as a means of social control. Thus, when welfare policy fails to create economic empowerment for impoverished communities, penal institutions function as a method to fill the void for the lack of social support. Yet the impact varies depending on race and gender. I theorize that for Black Americans, welfare policy will be less influential on their rates of incarceration than white Americans, due to racial biases in both the welfare state and penal systems. Evidence has shown that welfare policy is less generous in states with more Black recipients. Also, Black Americans are incarcerated at higher rates in states with lower Black populations. Both of these realities point to the ways in which Black Americans are subjected to racial biases. I theorize that welfare policy will impact the incarceration rates of Black women, but not Black men. Black women have been epitomized as welfare queens, based on misogynistic, racialized stereotypes of what an undeserving welfare recipient looks like. Due to the ways in which Black women are disproportionately subjected to poverty, I theorize that punitive welfare policy will impact the incarceration rates of Black women on top of the racial biases of the penal system. For Black men, welfare policy will not be as impactful. To test my hypotheses, I collect data on state TANF cash benefit amounts using Urban Institute's Welfare Rules database and incarceration rate data from the Bureau of Justice. I also use Ryan Golden Smith's Flexibility Index for state TANF policy. My independent variables are state TANF cash benefit amounts and TANF flexibility score, and my dependent variable is state incarceration rates. I run multiple regression models to test these theories. Figure 1 is the scatter plot I created to show the relationship between state cash benefit amounts and incarceration rates. As you can see, they are negatively associated. Thus, as cash benefit amounts increase, incarceration rates go down. This suggests that my theory that welfare generosity impacts incarceration is correct. Figure 2 displays my regression models, in which I look at incarceration rates by race and gender. I look at the relationship between TANF policy, urbanism, poverty by race, and the percent Black population. I yield interesting results, which show the way welfare policy is influential depending on race and gender. For white men and women, as TANF policy is more generous, incarceration rates decrease. For Black men, the only significant independent variable is the percent Black population. Thus, as the Black population decreases, Black male incarceration rates increase. For Black women, both TANF policy and the percentage Black population are significantly influential on Black female incarceration rates. Thus, it is evident that states with punitive, less generous welfare policy have higher rates of incarceration, yet these results vary by race and gender. It is necessary to take an intersectional approach to understanding the ways in which policy impacts varying intersecting identities. A better understanding of the consequences of weak welfare policy can guide policymakers to reconsider the importance of generous, flexible welfare policy. I also encourage further research into understanding the racial disparities of the prison system and how such disparities may be contingent on policy and biases outside of the penal system.